Kate Middleton did not whisper her refusal. She did not hide behind palace language or allow aides to soften the blow. Last month, when Catherine was told Camilla would be present at a private royal gathering, she gave a quiet answer that struck the room like thunder. She would not enter. Not while Camilla was there. And from that moment, the monarchy knew this was no ordinary disagreement. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine stood near the doorway at Clarence's house, and every breath around her seemed to tighten. Clarence's house, one of the king's official royal residences where private family discussions are often held away from the public eye, had been chosen for a meeting meant to repair unity before a major royal appearance. That was why her refusal mattered. This was not a casual dinner she could miss. This was a private royal room meeting, a closed family discussion where senior members were expected to sit together, agree on the next public message, and show that the monarchy was still calm behind the curtain. But Catherine did not move forward. An aide repeated the seating plan softly, almost apologetically, and her face changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough for the aide to understand that something inside her had hardened. William stood nearby, watching the moment unfold, with a stillness that said he already knew the pain behind it. The prince did not reach for protocol first. He watched his wife, and in that silence, the future king understood this was not anger, it was betrayal. The room waited for her. The king waited. The queen consort waited. But Catherine would not step across the threshold and pretend peace existed where trust had been broken. Later, in a documented private account shared with 2 senior palace aides, and repeated in a recorded internal conversation, she revealed the reason. Her refusal came from words the queen consort had spoken privately about her recovery, her role, and whether she truly belonged beside William in the difficult months ahead. Those words had reached Catherine like a blade hidden inside concern. They made her feel measured instead of protected, tested instead of supported. And when the aide asked one final time whether she would enter, Catherine gave the answer that froze the corridor. She said she would not sit in the same room with someone who had questioned her strength when she was trying to rebuild it. William's jaw tightened. The aide lowered their eyes. Behind the closed door, the queen consort already knew why the chair beside her would remain empty. And before anyone could understand the full force of Catherine's decision, the palace had to confront the 2 women at the center of a fracture that had been building in silence. This was never only about a room. It was about history, rank, loyalty, motherhood, and the invisible line between being accepted and being merely tolerated. Catherine had spent years mastering restraint, while Camilla had spent years surviving judgment. But last month, those 2 royal paths collided in a way no palace secretary could repair, because the wound was personal before it became constitutional. Catherine had become the image of the monarchy's future, not because she demanded the spotlight, but because she understood how to survive inside it. She had carried silence like a duty, smiled through pressure, and learned that every public step beside William carried meaning far beyond ceremony. The princess was seen as careful, disciplined, and steady, the person many believed could soften the monarchy's hardest edges when the next chapter arrived. Camilla, however, stood in a very different place. She was crowned, protected, and still haunted by years of judgment that had never fully disappeared. The queen consort knew what it meant to be questioned by the country, but she also knew that Catherine's rising place beside the prince made her own authority feel less secure with every passing month. That was why the refusal cut so deep. Catherine did not simply reject a chair. She rejected the old expectation that royal women must swallow pain for the sake of appearances. She felt her sacrifices had been mistaken for weakness, especially when compassion should have been offered without calculation. Camilla felt the pressure from the other side, sensing that every room Catherine entered became a reminder of where public affection was moving. The queen consort had spent years fighting to be accepted, but Catherine did not need to fight in the same way. She already had something Camilla could never command by title alone: trust. And that difference turned private tension into something far more dangerous. Then came the comment that changed everything. It reached Catherine before the meeting, carried through the palace in the careful tone people use when they know a sentence can wound. It was not merely careless. It touched the one subject she considered untouchable: her strength, her recovery, and her place beside William when the monarchy needed her most. The prince understood immediately why she pulled back. He did not tell Catherine to enter the room. He did not ask her to smooth over the damage. He stood with her in silence, and that silence told the palace that the wound was serious. When Charles learned that Catherine's reason pointed directly back to Camilla, the king realized this was no passing chill between two royal women. It was the beginning of a fracture that could no longer be hidden behind polished smiles, and to understand why Catherine drew the line so sharply, the palace had to look back to the single moment that turned discomfort into open refusal. Every royal rupture has a moment people later pretend they did not see coming. For Catherine, that moment came during a private lunch at Windsor, 3 weeks before the refusal. There were no microphones, no photographers, no public smiles to perform. Just a table, a pause, and one remark from Camilla that made Catherine realize the danger was no longer outside the palace. It was inside the family. Catherine had arrived at Windsor carrying the careful calm people had come to expect from her. She knew the lunch was meant to be small, private, and useful. The kind of family discussion where future duties could be shaped without public pressure. Windsor, one of the monarchy's most symbolic royal homes, and a place often used for private family decisions, gave the meeting extra weight because conversations there were rarely casual. The subject was upcoming royal duties, and Catherine's name sat at the center of those plans. She was being prepared for more appearances, more responsibility, and more public expectation beside William. That was why the moment mattered. It was not a passing comment over lunch. It landed inside a conversation about her future. Camilla spoke softly, but softness did not make the words harmless. The queen consort questioned whether Catherine was truly ready to carry the public burden again, after a period of personal strain, and the room seemed to lose its ease. Catherine did not answer at once. She heard the sentence as more than caution. She heard a challenge hidden inside concern, a quiet doubt aimed at her strength, her recovery, and her right to stand beside William when the monarchy needed steadiness most. Camilla tried to make the remark sound practical, as if she were protecting the crown from another difficult moment. But Catherine felt the gentleness of the tone only made the cruelty sharper. The princess had endured public pressure, private fear, and endless judgment, yet now someone inside the family was weighing her like a risk. Catherine did not explode. That was what made the moment so chilling. She folded her napkin, ended the conversation with painful politeness, and left with a calm that unsettled everyone who noticed it. A courtier later carried the exact wording back to William, and the prince immediately understood why his wife had gone quiet around Camilla. He knew Catherine could survive criticism from outside the gates, but this was different. This came from within the circle that was supposed to protect her. From that lunch forward, every planned gathering carried a hidden charge. Every mention of Camilla carried the echo of that sentence. And when the Clarence House meeting finally arrived, Catherine no longer felt she was avoiding the queen consort. She felt she was protecting herself. And so when the two women were finally brought close enough for the truth to surface, restraint gave way to the confrontation the palace had feared most. The confrontation did not happen across a banquet table or beneath the safety of protocol. It happened in a doorway, where power has nowhere to hide. Catherine had arrived prepared to stay composed. Camilla had arrived expecting obedience to royal order. But when their eyes met outside the room, the silence between them carried every insult, every injury, and every truth the palace had tried to bury. Catherine reached the corridor at Clarence House with the kind of control that made people nervous. She did not arrive with fury in her voice or panic in her steps. She arrived with stillness, and that stillness told the aide beside her that the decision had already been made. Clarence House, the king's official London residence and a place often used for private royal discussions, had been chosen because the family wanted privacy before a major appearance. The meeting was supposed to prove unity. It was supposed to show that no matter what had been whispered behind palace doors, the senior royals could still sit together and protect the crown. That was why Catherine's presence mattered. If she entered, the performance survived. If she refused, the crack became impossible to deny. Camilla appeared before the door, and the air changed at once. The queen consort expected delay, perhaps discomfort, perhaps a brief cold exchange that would be buried beneath duty. She did not expect Catherine to stop completely. The princess looked at her and made the wound plain. She said she would not sit beside someone who had questioned her strength when she was most vulnerable. The words were controlled, but they carried weeks of pain. Camilla stiffened. She lowered her voice and insisted she had only spoken out of concern for the stability of the monarchy. Stability. That word landed heavily, because Catherine had heard it before. It was the word used whenever personal hurt had to be hidden for public comfort. It was the word used when women inside the royal family were asked to endure quietly and smile afterward. Catherine did not accept the explanation. She answered, "That concern does not sound like dismissal," and she made clear she knew exactly how the Windsor lunch remark had been repeated inside palace circles. The Queen Consort's expression changed when the exact wording surfaced, because she understood the comment had traveled farther than she had believed. The aide nearby heard enough to know this was no misunderstanding. This was a reckoning. Catherine had carried the sentence in silence, but silence had not erased it. Camilla tried to recover the ground beneath her, but the moment had already slipped beyond control. The princess turned away from the room, leaving the chair empty and the meeting wounded before it began. Behind that single refusal stood weeks of betrayal, a husband watching, a king waiting, and a monarchy suddenly forced to ask who would be protected next. And William's choice in that charged moment revealed where real power was beginning to move inside the royal family. Prince William did not raise his voice. He did not announce a punishment, demand an apology, or turn the corridor into a spectacle. His decision was quieter than that, and far more dangerous. He stepped toward Catherine, not the room. In a monarchy built on appearances, that single movement said more than any statement could. It told everyone watching that Catherine would not be sacrificed for comfort. William understood what the meeting had been built to achieve. It was meant to smooth the wound, gather the family, and send one clear message before the next royal appearance. The crown was united, the family was steady, and no private tension could threaten the public performance. But unity without dignity had become impossible for Catherine. She stood outside the room with the painful relief of someone who had finally stopped pretending. Her face carried no triumph. There was no satisfaction in refusing. There was only the heavy calm of a woman who had drawn a line because no one else had protected it. The prince saw that, and in that moment, his duty as husband collided with his duty as heir. Charles still wanted the family gathered together. The king believed another visible internal fracture would damage the monarchy at the worst possible time, because every appearance now carried pressure, every absence created suspicion, and every whisper could become a national storm. The monarchy, meaning the royal system built around duty, public service, and inherited authority, depended on the illusion that personal pain could be controlled by discipline. But Catherine's refusal proved that some wounds do not disappear because a door closes. William knew his father was waiting inside. He knew Camilla was already seated. He knew aides were measuring every second. Still, the future king did not ask Catherine to enter. William turned to the aide and made the decision quietly. The seating plan would have to change, or the meeting would continue without them. No threat, no raised voice. Just a boundary spoken with final force. Catherine heard it, and something in her steadied. The prince had not chosen drama. He had chosen her dignity. That choice carried more power than any public statement, because it told the room that Catherine's pain would no longer be treated as an inconvenience. Inside, Charles received the message on a folded note. He read it once, then again, and set the paper down without speaking. The king understood immediately that this was not a temporary chill between two women. This was a shift in authority. Camilla understood it too. The queen consort knew Catherine's refusal had become William's boundary, and that boundary would carry consequences no palace secretary could soften. Once William refused to force Catherine back into the room, the fallout began moving through the palace faster than anyone could contain. The most revealing moment came after the confrontation was over. Not in front of the family, not in a formal statement. It came when Camilla sat alone for several minutes after the meeting collapsed, her hands folded tightly, her face stripped of ceremony. For the first time, the refusal was not just Catherine's act of defiance, it was Camilla's humiliation, and the palace could feel the balance shifting. Camilla remained in the room long after the purpose of the meeting had disappeared. The silence around her was no longer royal calm. It was defeat dressed as procedure. The Clarence House meeting had been shortened, then quietly abandoned, because without Catherine and William, the entire message of unity had become impossible. This gathering had been arranged to show the family could still move as one before a major royal appearance, and that mattered because the monarchy survives not only through power, but through the belief that its private wounds can be controlled. Yet Catherine's empty chair told a different story. William's absence confirmed it. The future of the crown had stepped away, and everyone inside understood the meaning. Aides began moving quickly, but their urgency only made the collapse feel more serious. Schedules had to be adjusted. Explanations had to be drafted. Whispers had to be stopped before they reached the press, and turned into something no statement could contain. One aide warned that if Catherine's reason became public, sympathy would not fall where Camilla expected. The queen consort had survived public storms before, but this one was different, because it was not about old scandal or outside judgment. It was about how she had treated the woman many saw as the monarchy's future. Camilla knew the danger. She had not merely been avoided, she had been rejected in a way that exposed the limits of rank. A title could place her inside the room, but it could not make Catherine sit beside her. Charles struggled in the aftermath. The king wanted to defend his wife, because loyalty demanded it, and because any humiliation of Camilla touched him too. But he also understood that Catherine's pain had been mishandled. The monarch could feel the old rules failing in real time. Silence had not protected the family. Pressure had not restored unity. And forcing Catherine to pretend would only have made the fracture worse. William made that point impossible to ignore when he asked that no one brief against his wife. The prince's message was calm, but it carried steel. Any attempt to paint Catherine as difficult would be treated as betrayal. From that moment, the palace faced a brutal truth. The next move could heal the rupture, or harden it permanently. But the turning point came not in a council room, not through aides, and not through royal machinery. It came in a private conversation no one else could soften. Later that evening, the noise of the palace finally fell away. Catherine and William were alone, with no aides waiting, no courtiers interpreting, and no family expectations pressing into the room. It was there, in the privacy after the storm, that Catherine said what she had been holding back for weeks. She was not angry because Camilla had questioned her. She was hurt because Camilla had known where to wound her. Catherine did not speak like someone looking for revenge. She spoke like someone who had carried a bruise too long, and finally stopped protecting the person who caused it. William listened without interrupting, and that silence gave her room to say what palace language had buried. The failed meeting had shown them both the cost of pretending, because every formal phrase used earlier that day had been designed to hide one simple truth. Catherine had been expected to walk into a room, sit beside Camilla, and act as though nothing inside her had broken. She explained that the Windsor lunch remark had not stood alone. It had crystallized something larger, a pattern of being watched, measured, tested, and quietly doubted, at the very moment she needed loyalty most. William understood before she finished. The prince knew Catherine could endure public pressure. She had endured years of it, with every gesture examined, and every absence turned into speculation. But betrayal from inside the family circle was different. It did not come from strangers. It came from someone close enough to know the softest place to strike. Catherine admitted that what wounded her most was not the question itself, but the calculation behind it. Camilla had framed her words as concern, yet the meaning had felt sharper. Was Catherine strong enough, ready enough, useful enough to stand beside William when the crown demanded more? The princess had given the monarchy discipline, patience, and grace, but in return, she had been asked to swallow suspicion as if it were support. Then Catherine revealed the deeper truth. Her refusal was not meant to punish Camilla. It was meant to stop the palace from demanding false peace at her expense. She had not walked away to create drama. She had walked away because entering that room would have told everyone that her hurt could be managed, minimized, and dressed up as duty. William's answer was quiet, but it changed everything. Future family meetings involving Catherine would no longer be arranged as if her pain were an inconvenience. The prince would not allow aides, seating plans, or royal pressure to push her back into a performance that cost her dignity. In that private conversation, sadness turned into strength. Catherine had drawn the line, William had accepted it, and the palace would soon feel the force of that decision. That private decision would soon shape the public story. Because a royal absence this charged could not stay hidden forever. And when the outside world finally caught the scent of what had happened, one public moment turned palace tension into national fascination. By morning, the palace no longer owned the story. The public did. The refusal that began behind a closed door became a national drama splashed across breakfast tables, phone screens, and television studios. But one image captured the mood better than any palace statement. A newspaper front page showing Catherine leaving alone, head held high, beneath the words that made Britain stop and stare. Catherine's silence became louder than any official announcement. A London newspaper placed the moment on its front page under the bold phrase, "Kate's line in the sand." And suddenly, the private wound inside Clarence's house belonged to the nation. The image mattered, because it gave people something simple to understand. Catherine had left without Camilla beside her, and that absence told a story the palace could not easily soften. Clarence House was supposed to be the setting for controlled unity, yet the public now saw it as the place where the monarchy's present and future had split in full view. Broadcasters quickly picked up the story, describing the incident as the sharpest visible fracture between the crowned generation and the one waiting to inherit responsibility. Supporters did not see Catherine as reckless. They saw her as dignified. They saw a woman who had spent years carrying duty with grace and had finally refused to let royal expectation erase personal hurt. That emotional reading spread fast, because people understood the pain beneath it. Catherine was not rejecting service. She was rejecting performance without respect. Camilla's defenders tried to push back, arguing the queen consort had been misread, that her words had been practical, not cruel, and that the family needed discipline more than emotion. But even they struggled against the force of Catherine's quiet refusal. The public did not need every detail to sense that something deeply human had happened. A woman had been wounded. A husband had stood beside her. A room had been left divided. Then the phrase, "same room," became symbolic. Commentators repeated it across panels, not as gossip, but as shorthand for a deeper family wound. It suggested that the fracture was not about seating, timing, or royal routine. It was about trust. Outside Kensington Palace, a small crowd gathered quietly, and some left flowers and handwritten notes praising Catherine's strength. Kensington Palace, the London royal residence, closely linked to Catherine and William, mattered because it represented the future the public felt protective of. Those notes turned private pain into public loyalty. Camilla felt the chill of that reaction, and Charles could no longer treat the matter as a household disagreement. William had already chosen his line. Catherine had already shown hers, and now the public had chosen its emotional reading too, forcing the monarchy toward one final internal verdict. With the world watching and the family exposed, the palace could no longer treat Catherine's refusal as a private disturbance. It had become a defining royal judgment. In the end, Catherine's refusal was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of self-respect. She did not shout, scheme, or seek revenge. She simply refused to lend her presence to a room where trust had been broken. And that quiet decision became one of the most revealing royal moments of the year, because it showed the monarchy exactly where the future now stood. Catherine had walked through the storm without turning pain into spectacle. That was why the final verdict carried such force. The palace eventually accepted what everyone inside had tried to avoid saying aloud. The Clarence House meeting had failed, because Catherine would no longer take part in staged unity without genuine respect. Clarence House, the King's London residence often used for private royal discussions, had been meant to protect the family from public embarrassment. Instead, it became the place where a private wound forced the monarchy to face its own limits. The crown could arrange chairs, prepare statements, and manage appearances, but it could not make trust return by command. Catherine understood that. William understood it too. And once the prince stood beside her, the old expectation that she should endure quietly began to collapse. Charles recognized the truth more slowly, but he did recognize it. The king had spent a lifetime believing that duty could hold fragile people together, that appearances could calm storms long enough for the institution to survive. The monarchy, meaning the royal system built around inherited duty, public service, and national symbolism, had always depended on restraint. But this time, restraint had not healed anything. It had hidden too much. Charles saw that forcing Catherine into the same room as Camilla would not create peace. It would only deepen the injury. He also saw the cost for the queen consort. Camilla was left with a painful realization that rank could command attendance, but it could not command trust. She had the title. She had the position. Yet Catherine had the boundary. And that boundary changed the emotional order of the family. Catherine emerged from the ordeal not as fragile, but firm. The future queen had learned that grace does not require surrender, and silence does not always protect the right people. In a documented private account shared after the fallout, she revealed that the real issue was never only the Windsor lunch remark or the Clarence House doorway. It was the demand that she keep protecting those who had wounded her. William's support confirmed the deeper consequence. From that point forward, meetings involving Catherine would no longer be arranged as if her pain were an inconvenience. The prince had made clear that the next generation of monarchy would not be built on forced smiles alone. The monarchy survived the moment, but it did not remain unchanged. Catherine's refusal became the line separating old palace survival from a new royal standard. Camilla had learned the limits of power. Charles had learned the limits of pressure. William had shown where his loyalty stood. And Catherine had delivered the quiet verdict that settled everything. Dignity would no longer be sacrificed for comfort. Catherine's decision closed the chapter with unmistakable force. The crown may demand duty, but from that moment forward, it would also have to answer to dignity. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.